Did you, Kate Mila Falcha? Welcome to Irish Granny Tarot. It's Sunday. I'm a day late, but somehow or other I thought it would be appropriate to do this book on a Sunday, the Sabbath. Actually, yesterday, just the way scheduling worked out, I posted two separate, quite lengthy talks with Denise and with Lena. And I know that many of you got to see those, and it was really fun. People thank me for doing them, and I have to laugh because I had a good time. It was really fun. And thank you to both of those wonderful people. I really appreciate it. I had a couple of things to talk about. Oh, I recommended a book, Talking to Lena, and I think I said the name of the book wrong. I think I called it Tell No One, but the name of the book is Say Nothing. You can kind of see how my poor brain. And the author is it's okay, Say Nothing, and it's by Patrick Keefe, Keefe, and it's about troubles in Belfast in the 70s ish, and a lot about the individual people who were involved in it. It's very interesting. It's not as heavily political as you might think. It's about the people, and it's really interesting. So, what book are we going to do today? Today, our book, I really had a struggle with this book. Not the doing of it, the deciding on it. This author, well, I'll just show you because you already know because you read the title of the video. Jesus and the Essenes by Dolores Cannon. And what's so interesting about this book is that I have resisted really investigating anything about Dolores Cannon for a really long time. I don't know why. Just I haven't done it. And her name has persisted in presenting itself to me in all different ways. And in the past 6 months or so, it has happened more and more and more and more. And I just feel like somebody's knocking on the door. I need to go see who's there. And quite recently, Dave Johnson did a thing on her. And I thought, okay, all right, I'll do it. And I wasn't quite sure which of her books I would pursue. And then a couple of you guys recommended this book, Jesus and the Essenes. Now, caveat. Please don't take this the wrong way. I'm not a religious person per se. I certainly have a strong background, and I know about the stuff of which those institutions are made. But that's not the path within those institutions. It's not the path that I follow. And it's kind of a smorgasbord for me, if you want to know the truth. And I don't call myself a Christian. But I believe in the basic tenets of the teachings of the life of Christ. I'm not even 100% certain that Christ was a real person or a conglomeration of people. I don't know. I don't have answers. And please, I know there are all kinds of belief systems about it and all kinds of theories. And I'm on a journey. But I keep my mind open. And so I finally decided to do it. However, I think you guys will take this in the spirit of humor in which it's intended. I took a picture of myself reading the book, like this, and sent it to my children. They were shocked. They couldn't believe it. I said, it's okay. I have not had a sudden conversion simply reading a book. But I'm very glad I read this book. While I was reading it, when I went on my walk, I listened to presentations on YouTube that Dolores Cannon has given about this book and about a couple of other things. And I actually found her really interesting, easy to listen to. Now, Denise tells me that her whole topic of is it the complicated universe, something like that, is really more complicated. And I didn't find this, in fact, this is one of the quickest, easiest books that I've read in a long time, and I didn't even have to rewrite my notes because it essentially is a transcript of hypnotherapy sessions interspersed with some commentary. But it's very simple to condense and present. So that was really a nice little treat. I also have an interest in history and archaeology, and I have read about the Gnostic Gospels and I've read about the Dead Sea Scrolls and always found that whole topic really interesting. And I had no idea when I started the book that that's what I was going to be delving into. So this is interesting from all different directions. But I want to warn everybody, please don't get mad at me. Please don't send me huge, gigantic diatribes about why I'm not telling the truth about Christianity, because this book challenges some conventional beliefs about mainstream Christian orthodoxy. And I'm not saying that I believe this. I'm not saying that I advocate it. I'm not saying that I disagree with it. What I'm saying is this is what's in the book. So take it with a block of salt. However, I will say, and she does point out, and I think I mentioned, but in case I forgot, that much of what is told to her is later, after the fact, confirmed by later archaeological discoveries or translations that had not occurred yet of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It answers a lot of questions that historians had, and it answers questions that archaeologists have had about some specific things that they have discovered over the years, and also just the ways in which people live their daily lives in that time and place. So I thought this book was really fitting. I say this a lot. I'm going to say it again because that's what I do. I repeat myself. These books seem to present themselves in a timely fashion. I never know from one week to the next what book I'm going to do, unless it's something people have requested and I plan ahead, which is actually the case for next week. But usually, a book just suddenly presents itself towards the end of the week, and as I'm tying up loose ends of the most recent presentation, there will be the new book just waiting to be read. And it almost always seems to be appropriate to the current events. I found this book to be magnificently appropriate given current events in the past few weeks and years, about the role of women in the world, about what Christ really said about women. If you want to believe that this is true. I mean, you don't have to believe that you can, take it or leave it, take it with a block of salt. But were this to be the truth, then it would be absolutely fascinating. Just really illuminates the role of women that we're not necessarily taught by mainstream religion. And there's a really nice little addendum at the end, because she wrote this book in 1992, and then in the early 2000s she did a little addition. So let's get started. That's the business out of the way. I think I thanked everybody. I think I did. Oh, and I wanted to point out, a couple of people have trouble seeing the cards sometimes because the light in here. I mean, I have limited opportunities to set this up, and I know that I've got a big bank of windows here, so I've got daylight streaming in here, which is nice right now. But at night, there's no good source of light, and so there's shadows and glare, and it's just really difficult. And I get really distracted trying to. I can't see the cards because I've got bad eyesight anyway. But people were asking me to please say the name of the card so that in case they can't see it, and I totally understand, because I find that some readers use beautiful artistic decks of cards. You notice I haven't used a lot of my fancy decks of cards lately because I can't see them, and it's so hard to, I don't want to make you all wait while I try to figure out what I'm looking at. And so I'm going to try to remember to say the name of the card, but I just want to prove to you that I really did take your suggestion to heart, and I'll try to remember. But keep in mind the amount of time it takes me to lift this little note to myself off the deck of cards and shuffle. It's entirely likely I'll forget, but I do have the best of intentions. The road to hell is paved with those, right? Oh my God. Okay. Nobody needs an introduction anyway, right? So let's get started, and we'll talk about Jesus and the Essenes by Dolores Cannon. Now, Dolores Cannon, I looked her up. I could find very little information about her, but I didn't spend a lot of time, and I will in the future, should I do another one of her books. I'll try to do a deeper dive into her life. I'm not sure where to look. So for now, she was born April 15th, 1931. She died October 18th, 2014. She was in Arkansas, living in Arkansas when I was listening to her because she made reference to it. I'm going to assume that that's where she lived for some time. So the beginning of this book is called How It All Began, and her story is this. She was married to a man who did hypnotherapy for not smoking and losing weight, and she started working with him and developed some hypnosis skills. And she realized that there were different levels of hypnosis, that when they put you under, and she said almost anybody could be hypnotized. It's not, you do it yourself a million times a day. I spend large portions of my day in perpetual hypnosis. If I'm knitting or daydreaming, those are forms of hypnosis. So if you meditate, if you just space out, you're driving and you realize, oh wow, I'm at my destination. That's a hypnotic state. And she said people who claim that they can't be hypnotized are few and far between. She said there's a form of regressive hypnosis called somnambulance, which is a much deeper state of hypnosis. And she realized that if she could bring people into that state, and about 1 in 20 people she found were capable of doing it, you could do a travel through time and space, that you could actually look at the past, take people back to their past lives and have them describe ordinary everyday things. This is what fascinated her. She was not on a hunt for anything terribly metaphysical. She was just curious to learn about historical times and places. She also warns that most people, if they undergo regressive hypnosis, are not Napoleon. They're not Cleopatra. They're usually somebody's kitchen maid or a farmer, or some humble, ordinary life that's really pretty dull. And she has to move them through chunks of time and ask them, tell me about a day that was really important to you, or tell me about a day that something significant happened, because their mundane life is usually uneventful and very days are similar, because most people never went farther than 15 miles from where they were born. People just didn't travel. Okay, so this is all predicated on the belief in reincarnation, and she does believe in reincarnation. And just very quickly, I know you guys all know this, but in case somebody new, reincarnation is the belief that our souls are eternal. Our bodies may die, but our souls, the essence of us, the light, the energy within us that comes from source, is eternal, and returns to that state of perfection through a process of rebirth. And it's entirely up to us to be reborn. We choose when and where, as whom, with whom we will come back for the lessons particular to that situation. So just a little gentle reminder, this mess we're all in, we asked to be here. we actually volunteered to be here. So, look at it as your mission in life. Here we are, and ask yourself why. What is it about this time and place that I have to learn, or that I can offer? That's the only solace I can give anybody these days. So you don't ever reincarnate as something lesser. You're not going to come back as a worm. There's a lot of people who don't really understand that. There are one or two philosophical beliefs in transmigration of souls, and that is a soul moving from one entity to another, so that you would come back as an animal or whatever. But those are entirely different sorts of soul energy, and once you're in human form, you're already elevating your vibratory level and maturing your soul, and it would serve no purpose to come back as a lower form of life. Not to denigrate animals, because they're a lot nicer than a lot of people. But so almost every religion, or most religions, or almost every culture, I'm generalizing here, has some present or former understanding or belief of reincarnation. It is common throughout human history, common throughout human philosophical thought, a topic of great debate and some acceptance. Western Christian philosophy has rejected it, but we'll go into that. And Dolores was saying that she learned by doing these regressive sessions that you change constantly in life. You're not the same person you were as a child. None of your cells is the same cell. You shed skin, you shed hair. You are a completely different physical entity than you were when you were born, not only to look at, but in content. And your spirit is kind of the same thing. And what it does is it sheds lives as it grows and changes. So you could look at reincarnation that way. Reincarnation is like looking back on your past lives, is like looking back on the childhood of the soul. Just as some people take longer to grow up on earth, as people, some people take many lives for their soul to grow. It's purely individual. And so life on earth is a school for the soul. And this is a philosophy, not a religion. You can believe in any religion and entertain a belief in reincarnation. It does not conflict with religious belief. It is rejected by some religious institutions, and we'll talk about that. It's not a dark art. She wanted people to know for sure it's not a dark art. This is not spooky stuff. This is not black magic. This is not demon possession. This is something completely different. And we'll discuss this as we go along. So life is continuous. Your soul is eternal. You have a body. You are not a body. Big distinction. Dolores loved the history of just history in general, and this regression was a way for her to get a peek at what went on in the past. And she said that like I mentioned earlier, you're in and out of hypnotic states all day when you space out in front of the television or the computer, or you go into the zone on your phone, or you stare out the window driving a car. All these little moments are forms of hypnotic state that you put yourself into. I used to be in trouble in grade school all the time. I would be like this, and I'd hear this voice, kind of like a Carlin joke, coming from way above. Helen, are you with us? No, I usually wasn't. So she said that when she regresses people into a light hypnotic state, they feel sort of like they're watching a movie, and they're able to tell you what they've seen. When you go into a much deeper hypnotic state, a state of somnambulism, she said it's like you become the person that you were. Now, it's not a situation that might endanger you from coming back. It's simply that you're traveling in your own past shoes for a while. So you relive what you went through, and you can't get hurt. Nothing bad can happen. But about 1 in 20 people can do this, and they will speak to her as though they are that person from the past. You can be either gender. She could take you back from the day you died to your birth, or start at the day you were born and move forward in increments. It's all very fluid. And she said that most people, like I said, almost always recall their lives as really boring, really ordinary, really routine. She said it's very similar to just sitting around and daydreaming about your childhood, dredging up childhood memories. She said that there's a thing called cryptoamnesia, which is hidden memories, and you recall them, but when you come out of the state of hypnosis, you don't remember what it is that you've been saying and doing while you're hypnotized. This is a very deep state of hypnosis. Let's see here. So the next chapter is about the girl that facilitated this book. Her name was Catherine Harris, and Dolores met her at a party when this Catherine was 22. And Kathy is how we refer to her. And they were just chatting. And she was born in 1960. Her parents, in Los Angeles, her parents were Assembly of God Pentecostals. So she had no knowledge of reincarnation, no understanding of hypnosis, no interest in Eastern religions or anything other than the religion she was brought up in. And she told Dolores at this party, you know, it's funny, I've always had an urge that I had to fight as a child because my parents would get angry at me to bless myself like a Catholic, you know, the Catholic sign of the cross. And she said she would always want to do that, somehow feel this urge and not understand why. Well, we're going to find out. Her family moved very often, 3 times between her sophomore and junior year in high school, and it was so unsettling and such a disruption for her in her life that she dropped out of high school. She took the GED and joined the Air Force, and so she had no real formal education past the age of about 15, 16, and no interest in it. Now, this is the early 80s, no computers, no internet. Put this in context of the inaccessibility of esoteric information. If you wanted to know about the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Gnostic Gospels, the Essenes, any of this stuff, you would have to really make a concerted effort to dig, and most likely you wouldn't find it in your hometown library. You'd have to be requesting special books. Anybody remember what that was like? It was very difficult to get information. So anyway, she was training in computers. She went to this party where Dolores met her, and they chatted, and Dolores mentioned, well, I regress people is what I do for a living. And she said, oh, that's so interesting. And Dolores said, well, you know, I am always looking for test subjects. Would you be interested? And I wouldn't charge you. This would just be for my own curiosity to perfect my skills. And she was all for it. She thought it was a great idea. So they arranged to meet. And she said that she started out with her, put her under, and started jumping back 100 years at a time. And talking every 100 years about who she was, what she saw, what happened, and taking her back 26 lives, and keeping notes on this and being very interested about it. And this was over a period of a number of sessions, and all of a sudden she gets to this life where Catherine claims that her name is Suddi, S-U-D-D-I, and she's a man. And Dolores said that all of these lives were very rich in cultural detail, historical fact, just rich. She said it was fascinating. So she presents herself as this guy named Suddi, and he claimed that he was young. He was an Essenes teacher, that she was coming to talk. It gets confusing. The subject was coming to talk specifically because there was an awareness that Christianity, modern day Christianity, conventional Christianity, contradicted how it really began and what it was really about. And there was a lot of angst about that, I guess, in the past, keeping in mind the theory being that time has no meaning, everything happens at the same time, it all happens in parallel. I know, my head's exploding. Don't ask me to explain it, I can't. So she had all these meetings with her. Eventually this young woman moved away. So the rest of the book is that was setting up the context. The rest of the book is her different sessions with Suddi. So when she was regressed, she would take on the body stature, the language, the facial expressions, and she would become the person who she was in a past life. And often she would speak English, but she would speak it with a completely foreign accent. And sometimes she would slip into foreign languages. She spoke in ancient Aramaic. And they knew this because they recorded it and had it translated and freaked everybody out. When they played it back to her after she came out of hypnosis, she was completely freaked out. So, it was as though she was translating when she talked. When it went into English, there were hesitations and pauses as she was mentally translating. So she introduced herself as, I am Benzamer, and my nickname is Sudi. Now I'm paraphrasing. It was not stated exactly like this. She didn't use the word nickname. My nickname is Sudi. I'm 30 years old. I'm unmarried. I live in the hills. And she described this community, which was a secretive community. And she was reluctant to go into detail. Dolores had to really tiptoe around her to get, I keep saying her, keep in mind this is a male life. The name of this community was Qumran with a Q. And Sudi said, I study Torah and the Hebrew law, which he went on to explain, no matter what you guys think, the Hebrew law was just the laws without Moses in them. And a student was not a rabbi. At this point, this is going back in time a little bit in the same Sudi's life. At this time, Sudi is saying, right now I'm a student and I'm studying law and Torah, and I'm not a rabbi specifically because a rabbi is a teacher. I'm just a student right now, but I will be a rabbi. Rabbis mostly live in the villages. The masters are the ones who stay at the school. So I suppose it would be the difference between kind of a minister / grade school teacher, Sunday school teacher, versus a professor, And the duty of the masters is to pass on knowledge, that this knowledge is sacred, it's ancient, it's protected, and it is taught over a long period of time, living within the community. It is absolutely secret, not allowed to be told except to other students from the masters. And then there are parts of it that they take out and share with the public. That he would leave eventually and teach after this would happen, after the sign in the heavens. And Dolores said, what are you talking about? Because at this point, she still doesn't know the full context of what she's got in front of her. And she says, what sign? What are you talking about? And this guy says, well, that he has come. And she says, who? Now she's starting to get suspicious. And he says, the Messiah. And then he went on to explain that there's going to be a celestial sign, that the Messiah, in the tradition of the Jewish person who's coming to give something to the world, saying the word to save the world, salvation, all of that stuff is the weight of interpretation that has been put on it afterwards. This is not the way these people regarded it right before Christ was born. This is not what they were looking forward to. They were looking forward to this wise person coming, a reincarnation, and there would be a sign that the time had come. It would be celestial, and it would be 4 bright lights in the 4 corners of the sky would converge over the place where this Messiah was born. It wasn't a comet. It wasn't a meteor. It wasn't one big gigantic star. And Dolores sort of hints at having done a bunch of astronomical research after these sessions. She said the only conclusion that she could come to is, this sounded like UFOs. We'll go on and you'll see why. She discovered that this community that Sudi lived in was in Judea, near Bethlehem, in the hills, during the reign of Herod the First. So now we have a time and a place, a context to put this life in. And she asked, well, what Qumran, what is this all about? And he said, well, the Essenes are my teachers, and they have no wish to be found. They were greatly feared by those in power because their knowledge of mysteries threatened the hegemony of the leaders in charge, and they feared that the Essenes with knowledge would gain too many followers and too much power, and they made it their job to get rid of them when they found them. So the Essenes were much more adherent to the laws of the Torah and dedicated to the prophecies of a Messiah coming than the regular Jews living around Judea, Israel, that whole area. These guys were the real deal. And here's where it gets interesting. More than half of their students and teachers, masters, were women. Men and women had an equal role. It's not segregated. Nothing was segregated in their community. And the quote is that one away from the other is not complete. That each gender is the half of a whole, and they require each other to be complete. And the Essenes totally were considered crazy by the Jewish mainstream. I suppose it very much reminded me, I told my friend earlier, very much reminded me of hippies. And very much, while I was reading all of this, you tell me what you think. What kept popping into my mind was John and Yoko. You'll see why. Very interesting. Although with a whole lot more self-discipline. Sudi was very reluctant to give Dolores details. He said that there were many who fear and want to destroy the Essenes, and because they're a secret sect, a school of thought, and not a religion, and their god was a god with no name. Yahweh was not their God. They have what they call Abba, God Father, which was a completely different kind of God. So who were the Essenes? Her technique was not to do a lot of research while she was undergoing these regressive sessions. She wanted to be a tabula rasa, a clean slate. She wanted to not have her prejudices influencing what she was hearing or leading the questions. So a lot of this stuff is information she got together after the sessions were all completely finished. So the Dead Sea Scrolls were reputed to be talking about Qumran, this community, and the Essenes. And Dolores had a really difficult time finding information. And finally, she did find a book called The Essene Heritage, written in 1967 by Martin A. Larson, with an O. And I don't know at this point if there are more books, more recent, that are more thorough. I know there's a book called The Gnostic Gospels that I read, and I know I really liked it. That's all I remember. I believe it was written by a woman, but I read it in, maybe in the 90s. It's been a long time. And she raises the question, why is it so difficult to get information about the Dead Sea Scrolls? You would think people would be thrilled. It was considered the greatest archaeological discovery in history. And what are the Dead Sea Scrolls? I think I'm going to go into them more here, and if I don't, I will. So let's just move on with my notes. I tend to digress and get lost in a maze here. So she asked herself, is there a cover-up? Because why do they not want this information to be revealed? And maybe what was said on the scrolls was too much for the established church, with a capital C, the Catholic Church, to accept, because there are discrepancies with the Bible. And Christianity, the big one is, Christianity existed before Christ, that Christianity was taken from the beliefs and the philosophies and the lifestyle of the Essenes. So, a guy called John Marco Allegro was one of the original 8 scholars who formed a board who would edit the Dead Sea Scrolls. He was the only one who was not religious. The rest were all affiliated with religious institutions. Eventually, he started talking, and they got mad, and he was not allowed to even see the scrolls anymore. There were at least 400 documents, and only 4 or 5 have been released to the public. they've been rehidden. They are once again kept out of our sight. And a theologian involved in this is quoted publicly as saying, "I wish they would just disappear and resurface after about 2 more generations." So there is something in these scrolls that so strongly challenges the cherished tenets and beliefs and practices of established Christian faith that they're afraid of it. And we're going to get a little taste of what some of that might have been. The scrolls are kept at the Shrine of the Book in Israel. There's been a concerted attempt to wipe out information about the Essenes because of their similarity with what is considered the doctrine of Christianity taught by Christ. And if you challenge that it came from Christ, then you're challenging that it's received from the Son of God. It just challenges the whole basic tenet. Don't command me. This is in the book. And a few ancient authors talked about the Essenes. If you go really far back, Philo, who was a philosopher, he was Jewish, he was in Alexandria, Egypt. Pliny, the Roman writer, which is really Pliny in Latin, Roman writer, and Josephus, who was a warrior, Jewish warrior, and a historian. And Philo was 60 AD, 20 BC to 60 AD. Pliny was 23 AD to 79 AD, and Josephus was 37 AD. Josephus lived with the Essenes. The other two, what they had to say was hearsay. But he altered information that he got from the Essenes to agree with Greek philosophers that were popular at his time. So he was doing a little fake newsing himself. And these accounts verify some of the information that this Sudi life was giving under regression. In 68 AD, the Romans destroyed the community of Qumran. They killed everybody they could get their hands on, and they leveled the place. The ruins, all this time since 68 AD, the ruins had been thought to be a Roman garrison, because when they went there, they found, on the surface, they found a lot of discarded Roman military junk. And nobody pursued it any farther than that. In 1947, a shepherd boy chasing after a goat discovered in one of the many caves in the hills outside of this ancient ruins jars, and inside the jars were scrolls and fragments of papyri and some tablets. And metal tablets with writing on them, which I didn't know. I thought that was very interesting. It was considered the greatest discovery in the history of mankind because it answered so many questions. They answered so many questions that scholars had. They completed many of the stories that were in the Bible and in the Torah, in the Old Testament. And in 1952, because of the scrolls, they started archaeologically investigating the entire area, and in 1952 they discovered that the ruins were actually the source of the scrolls, and that it was the community of Qumran, and it had been the commune of the Essenes. So I'm going to stop now because this is the end of that chapter, and this is a really good place to stop. I can't think of if I do a card reading right now, it's going to take more time than we have, based on how my iPad likes to shut itself off. So I'm going to save questions at least to the next reading, the next video, and maybe even farther than that. But I promise you that even if I need to do a separate video with nothing but questions about the book for the cards, we will address the cards. So thank you for watching. I'm going to upload this, and I'll be back as soon as it does its magic thing. Okay, slanga foil and slancha.